The mockery begins. The massive viewing ports of Station Nexus 7 framed the swirling nebula beyond like a cosmic painting. Ambassador Sarah Martinez stood at the observation deck, her reflection ghost-like against the starfield. Behind her, the station hummed with activity as delegates from across the galaxy prepared for the most important trade summit in centuries. Sarah adjusted her simple blue diplomatic jacket and turned to face her security detail. Captain David Torres stood at attention, his weathered face showing no emotion despite the long journey from Earth. Beside him, Sergeant Lisa Park maintained the same professional composure, her dark eyes scanning the corridor with practiced vigilance. What made them remarkable wasn't their alertness or their perfect uniforms. It was what they didn't carry. While every other security team on the station bristled with weapons, force fields, and tactical gear, the human guards wore nothing but their standard-issue clothing. No energy rifles, no plasma swords, no sonic disruptors. They looked too alien, eyes utterly defenseless. "Ma'am," Captain Torres said quietly, "we should head to the main assembly hall. The opening ceremony begins in 20 minutes. Sarah nodded and began walking toward the central hub of the station. As they moved through the corridors, she noticed the stares and whispers from other delegations. The Zephyrians, with their crystalline skin, pointed at her guards and made clicking sounds that their translators rendered as laughter. A group of Corvin warriors, each standing nearly 8 feet tall, with natural armor plating, looked at the humans with what could only be described as pity. They entered the main assembly hall, a vast circular chamber that could hold representatives from all 47 member species of the Galactic Trade Consortium. The humans had been assigned seats in the outer ring, marking their status as the newest and least influential members. As Sarah took her place at the polished metal podium, Prime Minister Vexstar of the Zephyrian Collective approached. His insectoid features were difficult to read, but his tone was unmistakably condescending. "Ambassador Martinez," he said, his voice like wind chimes in a storm, "I couldn't help but notice your security arrangements. Are your guards perhaps ceremonial? Surely you don't expect them to provide actual protection?" Sarah smiled diplomatically. "Captain Torres and Sergeant Park are fully qualified protection specialists, Prime Minister. I have complete confidence in their abilities." Vexstar's compound eyes glittered with amusement. "How fascinating. On Zephyr Prime, we learned long ago that strength comes from superior technology and weapons. Your species seems to have missed that lesson." Before Sarah could respond, General Krex of the Corvin military caste strode over. His massive frame cast a shadow over the human delegation, and the ceremonial warhammers at his sides hummed with contained energy. "The soft-skins think they can protect their diplomat with bare hands," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "Perhaps they should have stayed on their little blue world where the predators are small and weak." Captain Torres remained perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back. Sergeant Park's expression didn't change by even a fraction. Their composure seemed to irritate the Corvin general more than any response would have. "No weapons, no armor, no enhancement implants," General Krex continued, circling the human guards like a predator studying prey. "On Corvin 7, such beings would be considered livestock." The nearby delegates began to gather, drawn by the spectacle. Representatives from the Andromedon Council, the Spiral Coalition, and even the normally peaceful Luminar Assembly watched. With interest, some seemed curious, others appeared concerned, but most looked amused. Ambassador Lysis of the Nexari Republic slithered closer on her serpentine lower body. "Perhaps the humans are making a statement about their peaceful intentions," she suggested, though her tone suggested she found the idea foolish. Though in a galaxy where strength determined survival, such gestures seem ... naive. Sarah felt her patience being tested, but she maintained her diplomatic smile. "Humanity believes that true strength comes from discipline, training, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Our guards represent those values." This drew outright laughter from several delegates. Prime Minister Vexstar's antenna twitched with mirth. "Discipline? Training? Child? We have warriors who can split atoms with their thoughts and soldiers who can move faster than light itself. What could your primitive species possibly teach us about strength?" Chancellor Zeph of the Andromedan Council, whose species was known for their telepathic abilities, studied the human guards with his large, dark eyes. "I sense no fear from them," he said quietly. "That is... unusual." "Of course they're not afraid," General Krex boomed. "They're too ignorant to understand the danger they're in, like children playing with fusion cores." The crowd of delegates grew larger as word spread about the weaponless humans. Soon representatives from dozens of species had gathered too. Witness what many considered either a bold statement or a cosmic joke. Director Quinn of the Silicon Hegemony approached on his mechanical legs. Sensors worry as they analyze the human guards. "My readings show no cybernetic enhancements, no genetic modifications, no technological augmentations of any kind. They are entirely ... organic." Primitive corrected Commander Rax of the Stellar Navy, whose own body was more machine than flesh. "On my home world, we evolved past such limitations millennia ago." Through it all, Captain Torres and Sergeant Park remained motionless. They didn't argue, didn't defend themselves, didn't even acknowledge the insults. Their silence seemed to frustrate some delegates and intrigue others. Admiral Cortez of the Void Hunters, a species known for their mastery of dark energy weapons, leaned against a nearby pillar and watched with predatory interest. "I've studied the combat records of many species," she said in a voice like whispered threats. "Humans appear in none of them. No great battles, no legendary warriors, no weapons that shake the foundations of reality. How did such a species survive long enough to reach the stars?" "Dumb luck," suggested Economic Minister Flux of the Trade Syndicate. "Or perhaps their world is so peaceful that they never needed to develop proper defenses." Sarah knew she had to address the situation before it undermined humanity's position in the negotiations to come. "I appreciate everyone's concern for our security arrangements," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "However, I assure you that our methods, while different, are quite effective." Prime Minister Vextar's mandibles clicked. In what passed for a chuckle among his kind, effective? "My dear Ambassador, effectiveness in security is measured by results. Your guards look like they would struggle against a determined merchant, let alone actual threats." The insults continued for several more minutes, with each species seeming to compete in describing how inadequate the human security team appeared. Through it all, Captain Torres and Sergeant Park stood like statues, their breathing so controlled it was barely visible. Finally, the opening ceremony began, and the delegates reluctantly returned to their seats. As the grand speeches commenced, Sarah noticed that many representatives continued to glance toward her guards, some with amusement, others with curiosity. What none of them realized was that beneath their calm exteriors, both human guards were continuously assessing threats, calculating distances, and preparing for scenarios that their training had drilled into them thousands of times. They had heard every insult, cataloged every potential hostile, and memorized the layout of the entire chamber. Captain Torres had already identified 17 potential weapons within arm's reach, from decorative sculptures to the ceremonial staffs carried by various delegates. Sergeant Park had mapped every exit, calculated the time needed to evacuate their principal to safety, and noted which alien species moved with the fluid grace that suggested combat training. As the ceremony progressed, speaker after speaker took the podium to discuss trade routes and economic partnerships. Sarah reflected on the reactions they had received. The galaxy seemed to equate strength with technology, size, and visible weapons. It was an understandable assumption given the advanced civilizations that populated the stars, but they had never encountered a species like humanity. A species that had evolved not just intelligence, but the ability to push their physical forms to extraordinary limits through sheer determination and training. A species that had learned, through countless conflicts on their harsh homeworld, that the most dangerous weapon was the one no one could see coming. The ceremony concluded with polite applause, and delegates began to file out for the evening's reception. Prime Minister Vextar paused beside the human delegation one final time. "Do enjoy the reception, Ambassador," he said with mock concern. Though perhaps you should consider staying close to other delegation security teams. For your own protection, of course. Captain Torres spoke for the first time since entering the hall, his voice so quiet that only Sarah could hear. Ma'am, permission to speak freely? Of course, Captain. They have no idea what they're dealing with, do they? Sarah smiled, an expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. No, Captain. They don't, but they will. The first day of the Galactic Trade Summit had ended with humanity firmly established as the galaxy's newest curiosity. What no one suspected was that by the end of the week, that curiosity would transform into something else entirely, something that would change how every species in the galaxy viewed the quiet. Weaponless humans from the small blue world at the edge of the Orion Arm. The evening reception awaited, and with it, more opportunities for the galaxy to underestimate Earth's silent guardians.